Good morning, St. Peter's. We continue to look at the marks of the church as we go through Revelation. Yesterday we saw a church marked by love. This morning, a church marked by suffering. Jesus expects as his church that we will suffer for him. Revelation chapter 2 verses 8 to 11. The church in Smyrna is told that they will suffer for Jesus. He says, "Don't be afraid what you are about to suffer." Verse 10. "Some of you will be thrown into prison. You will experience affliction, but be faithful." Suffering, there's two things to really say about suffering. And this morning, the first one is that suffering is unavoidable. It's part of life. If you ignore it and we're not prepared for it, we will be devastated when the gap between what we expect and when reality hits us. Some suffering is we experience when we reap what we sow. Other suffering is just part of the brokenness of the world. We mightn't deserve it, but it may just be being a part of the fact that we are limited creaturely and part of the world. But the third type of suffering is when we suffer for following Jesus. Perhaps we'll suffer for being people who stand up for truth. We'll suffer for being people who live a particular way. But suffering for Jesus makes all the difference when we know it's for him, because we follow the suffering servant. It shouldn't be a surprise if the one who was mocked, who was shamed, who was misunderstood and ultimately killed, it shouldn't be a surprise if we suffer. Since suffering is unavoidable, Jesus tells the church at Smyrna to suffer well. To suffer well. But the second thing about suffering, alongside it being unavoidable, is it's really, the important thing is, as a Christian, it's great to know the purpose of suffering, because we know that it's not fruitless, and makes all the difference in the world to know that Jesus, when he suffered and when he was raised again, he came and he had nail marks in his hands. It showed where his suffering was. His suffering wasn't taken away, but rather it was transformed. And in the end result of that suffering was glory. And this makes all the difference to know that we can have hope in our suffering. The difference is, in the world, people may experience suffering and may not understand its purpose, or may just see it as fruitlessness. But we know that our Master has conquered death itself, and he lives and he's alive. And the end result is the hope that we have, life with him. And so our life is shaped not by the end being death, but our life is shaped by resurrection. And this makes all the difference in the world, in being people that are being in the world but not of the world, and being called to be different. It means we can face suffering with the knowledge that this too will end, that Jesus has died, that he has conquered, that I am his and he is mine, and we suffer with hope. It's not meaningless, because God will transform it into glory, especially if we know how to suffer well and if we suffer for Jesus. That's today, a church marked with suffering. Tomorrow, a church marked by truth. I look forward to seeing you then.